Chapter 40 for Saggy. Titty which Mateo, how this absolutely stupid plan was working was beyond me. I'd thought through several scenarios and possible outcomes to Baron's stupid proposal, and only about 6 of them made it this far. The one that I deemed most likely was that I would have just been ambushed at the border. This entire time Baron had been actually plotting against me, and this whole thing was just one big setup. I would show up at Vindicta's border with my 9-pack members just to be greeted by an army of Vindicta and UI room members that would kill me on the spot. In that scenario, I would accept the stupidity and naivety of my own actions and welcome defeat. I would have no other option. I could simply just pray that Kae didn't decide to suddenly want to play hero and come to avenge me, because no matter how my fate decided to pan out, as long as Kae played her part, she would be safe. As I walked aimlessly with Hayden, it became clear to me where a lot of Kae's crude humor came from. He cracked a few jokes that I was sure I had heard Kae make once or twice. It made a dark pit swell in my chest just thinking about my girl. I wasn't aware of much about Hayden beyond what Baron had told me. He and Kae were close to one another when they were stuck together in Vindicta's prison, both physically and emotionally. Being in the cell adjacent to hers, he had come to be a mediator and a friend to my slightly psychotic mate. Whereas I knew that Baron was sending over Hayden, I had no clue he was sending over Taylor when he had. When I came to realize who Taylor was, I questioned her myself as to why Baron was sending over his own pack members if he was only an alliance. Alliances in pack issues only tend to intervene if and when the packs at war decide to attack. Otherwise, actions like sending in Taylor to cause a scene would be means of starting a war with UI Room as well, which was beyond senseless. Alliances in circumstances like these serve more as a form of backup rather than a true enemy, not on the same team but not actively fighting them. Taylor quickly admitted Baron's plan. His intentions would have worked beautifully if I was an idiotic, lenient alpha. Unfortunately, the chances of me ever trusting Taylor enough to let her walk freely around my mate without knowing she was an actual threat was absolutely ethereal. I didn't reach out to Baron after speaking with Taylor. I asked Farah. She wasn't one to stoop to whatever nonsense that Baron or Adrian would be feeding her, so I trusted what she had to say over Baron's big mouth. Her story matched up with Taylor's and kind of confirmed that Baron wasn't a total prick. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I got in touch with Baron, who asked, "Do you really think I want to help that brained idiot?" Before filling me in on his deceitful little plan to undermine Vindicta and help my mate, I suppose she somehow wormed her way into his heart. If I wasn't so relieved that I didn't have to worry about Baron's pack any longer, I'd be drilling my elbow into his temple for taking any sort of liking towards what is mine. He alerted me that he would be sending Hayden over. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nelban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I thought it was beyond foolish and unnecessary. It was also just putting the plan in jeopardy by revealing the truth to Kae that we'd been hiding for weeks. Originally, we both agreed that Kae was a bit of a hellion. We couldn't positively decide how she would vibrate with the information that her forbidden best IE was actually putting his own life and pack at risk to help her. Kaya also had a tendency to not be the best decision-maker and secret keeper, so it terrified both of us that she might slip up and do or say something dumb. The entire endeavor was far too risky, so we deemed telling Kae a minor problem to worry about later. It was when Baron proposed the hypothetical situation that Kae might not agree to go with Taylor unless she had a feeling she could be trusted that we realized Kae would need to be made aware of the plan. I wanted to tell her, but we both knew that Kae would have tried putting a stop to me risking my own life to save hers if she knew the entire thing. She would try to think of 1,000,001 other ways to go about it that meant me not leaving her side and leaving her alone. So Baron sent Hayden, someone she trusted, to relay only the bits and pieces of the plan that she needed to know. Baron was our ally, and Taylor was here to help her. That earned him a point or two at my book. Hayden had the opportunity to run, never even come into Cedar's territory, and never be seen again. But he didn't. He followed through with the plan and returned to Baron when it was all over. It was something I could never imagine Kaie doing. She'd throw up a peace sign at the border, spit, and then laugh as she booked it. I've got other things to deal with right now. Love you. By Baron's voice floated to my ears, followed by the small ring signaling the end of a call. I scrunched my nose up in disgust but was happy that he and Farah seemed to be making progress. They may be the worst mate pairing I'd ever seen. It's about time you guys got here, he called out as we eventually came into his line of sight. I rolled my eyes. You couldn't have picked a more remote area of the woods if you tried, I noted, surveying the thick covering of trees around us. Taking in a deep breath, Baron smiled proudly. I know. It's the densest part of the forest. His eyes connected with mine. The cocky smile still plastered to his lips from the last time I saw him. Patrols only come out here when there's suspicious activity in the northern part of the territory. What a King idiot. I nodded. Agreeing that Adrian Rach did tend to have a little too much faith in the safety of his land. Luckily, they would be too tied up with the commotion we had caused in the southeast area of the territory to worry about the north. How much time do we have to get this over with? My arms crossing over my chest as Baron continued to mentally praise himself. I could only handle so much time with him. He was a good alpha, and he knew it. He was not, however, a humble alpha, and that made it practically impossible for me to stomach him as a human being. If I didn't die from him or Adrian first, I might end up taking my own life from sheer annoyance. Not much. Seemingly unfazed, I told Blockhead that I saw you making your way towards the southern part of the territory, so I sent 7 of my own to run around aimlessly to confuse his stupid mutts. By the way he was laughing, this was clearly all very entertaining for him. He is an alpha, you know, I acknowledged, noticing his heavy use of nicknames. Looking me dead in the eyes, and said, his other half was human. He is no alpha, Kaie. I could practically feel the bile in my stomach sloshing around and heaving upwards as Taylor dragged me through the airport. The car ride was a horrendous activity full of unanswered questions and vomit. Brakes. I prayed to the moon goddess to make it stop. She didn't. I prayed to God to magically put my motion sickness medication in my hands. I prayed to the devil to kill me. Clearly, that went unanswered. As well, I was moments away from reaching out to Zeus. Luckily, we arrived at the airport. It was a familiar experience because only a few months ago did Matteo and I have to fly home from Canada. However, to my agent extraordinaire, Mylen Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing pre-shoots enthusiasm. High-intensity feeling like I was the main character in an action movie who was being hunted down was a new addition to being in the airport that did not make my stomach react calmly. I threw up right in the middle of the floor, and I thought Taylor was going to beat me over the head. All she kept saying was, "Is this how you people lay low?" Boarding the plane was a different situation. As I walked down the aisle, I read each seat number until I finally found the one that matched my ticket. I could feel Taylor's impatience radiating off of her in waves, but they couldn't fly the plane until I was seated, so I was going to take my time. My stomach still wasn't entirely settled, and I kind of wanted to ask if we could pop open a window for me to dry heave out of for a second. My eyes widened as they finally found the matching number. However, my face quickly fell as I realized where the seat was located. I stopped in my tracks, causing Taylor to smack into me. "Oh," she hissed. I'm not sitting there." To my agent extraordinaire, Mylen Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Pointing at the seat like there was a dead body sitting in it. "Yes, you are. That's your seat. Now get in." She pushed. I kept my feet grounded as the grumbles of other people trying to board the plane met my ears now. "I can't sit by the window," I argued, turning around to look at Taylor. I was glad that it was Taylor who was transporting me like luggage to her nose were because she wouldn't tell me. First of all, Taylor was short, so I got to look down at her. It made me feel better arguing with her because I felt like I was fighting with a child. Taylor was also not nearly as aggressive as Donnie. I'm sure Daniela would have just thrown me in the chair the minute I stopped moving. Perhaps I'll have Matteo consider making Taylor my new babysitter. Dude, it's a window. Go now. By now. The people around us were getting to Daniela's level of aggressive. I could hear some little old lady call me a brat. And I shot my gaze around trying to find the saggy titty witch. I was interrupted by another shove. Sit down. Taylor grunted, effectively managing to push me down into the seat. A few people muttered finally, as the line started moving forward again. I can't do this. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I tried standing up, but Taylor pushed me back down with a stern look. She was going to be one of those short, angry moms when she was older. I could feel it. Just peer, kids. Sit, she ordered. I gawked at her and debated asking if she was even allowed telling me what to do. She reached inside of the bag and pulled out a pill bottle, tossing it to me. I eyed the bottle in confusion as she jammed the bag in the overhead compartment. What are these? I didn't recognize them. They definitely weren't the pills that Matteo bought me, and I'd never been much of a pill popper. Some medication that he put in there for you. She answered as she got comfortable in her seat. He just said to give you those as soon as we got on the plane. But what for? God, I don't know. Probably because he knows you get carsick. I mumbled, trying to read the label on the canister. I couldn't. But it was the thought that counts. It was stupid and simple. But my heart felt warm that even when he was trying to ship me away like an animal, he was still worried about me getting sick. Yeah, real romantic. Just take them. She chided bored-lie, leaning back in her seat and closing her eyes. Sighing, I popped open the bottle, asked Taylor how many I was supposed to take, and then swallowed 2 of them dry. The rest of the plane boarding was uneventful. It was about another half an hour of people who smelled weird walking too close to Taylor. Every time someone would touch her, she would flinch away and lean towards me. I thought, calmer. I was beginning to feel okay again. But then the plane started. It felt like someone set off an atomic bomb in my stomach. My attention snapped to the window. I placed a hand on the glass and tried pressing on it lightly. It didn't budge. How do I open the window? I asked to no one in general. You don't, Taylor responded, and felt fear ball up in my chest. I twisted around in my seat to see how far away the bathroom was. I gulped, realizing that if worst came to worst, I would either be sprinting or throwing up in Taylor's lap. I returned to my regular seating position. The plane started moving forward, and the unsettling weight in my chest intensified. I quickly slammed down the blind in front of the window so that I couldn't see the world moving around us. Taylor was unfazed. Her head was tipped back, eyes closed. I assumed this was a regular way of travel for her because she was far too comfortable. As the plane lifted from the track, I dug my nails into the armrests, unable to stop myself. My claws came out for a moment, damaging the fabric. I grimaced. Matteo would have given me that disapproving parental look if he saw me do that. I couldn't stop the grimace from morphing into a frown. This would be easier with Matteo. His hand holding mine was always enough to help my nerves to calm themselves. He wouldn't have yelled at me for throwing up in the middle of the airport. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He would have rubbed my back and told everyone staring at me to mind their business. The plane ride wouldn't feel like blasting into a terrifying voyage into the unknown depths of space. It would have been bearable. But, sadly, all I had was my midget warrior, and she's about as much help as she was tall. I said softly, I knew we were flying now, although I couldn't see it. I should have felt more fearful, but the heaviness of my eyelid led me to focus on that instead. Well, I'm tired, and why won't you just tell me what's going on? Her eyes popped open to look over at me, and they narrowed, because we aren't there yet. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Nice try, she mused, crossing my arms like a child. They felt so heavy. I was moving in slow motion. Taylor's head rolled on her shoulders as she looked back at me as I pouted. She shook her head and closed her eyes, leaning back, their ears everywhere. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I wanted to argue and tell her not to call me that it was an ugly name, but the tired feeling swaddled me like it was a weighted blanket. My blinking slowed until I could no longer keep my lids from parting. I had a feeling that the medication was more of a sedative than a cure for motion sickness. Chapter 45 Self, proclaimed Prince of Alphas. My back hurt. The exhaustion laying throughout my body made waking up a miserable experience. I wasn't even fully awake, and I already wanted to wring out my spine like a wet rag. Prying my eyes open, I found myself overwhelmed by confusion as I looked around at a foreign living space. I gazed down at where I had been sleeping. A couch. "Good morning," Taylor said, reminding me that I didn't wander into a random house all by myself. She was sitting in a chair at the opposite end of the couch, watching me with a lopsided smile. With a grunt, I pushed myself up to get a better look at her. She had changed from the clothes I had given her and seemed to have taken a shower as well. "Where are we?" The fatigue in my voice took a giant step forward, making it sound like I just gargled the gravel. Surrounding me were creamy-colored walls, polished wooden floors, and expensive leather furniture. The house was cozy, but the lack of decoration and TLC left me unconvinced that it was a lived-in setting. "Home," she stated simply. Her response left her seemingly unfazed but had the opposite effect on me. "You're home. You're home," she solidified. My lips puckered in thought. My home. This was not the pack house. "What?" Taylor sighed. She pushed herself up from the chair and walked into a dining area that was connected off to the side of the living room, grabbing the familiar bag from the large mahogany table. She rifled through it until she retrieved what she was looking for. With a paper or two in hand, she walked back into the living room and handed it to me. "What's this?" Snatching it with the greed of a hungry, homeless man. "Those are your ownership papers." See, she pointed to the bottom of the first page. Printed neatly across the bottom were two names: Nathaniel Hall and Elise Gentry. I scrunched my nose, grimacing. Elise Gentry. The name tasted sour. "I don't want it," I pouted, making Taylor roll her eyes. She plucked the papers from my grasp, earning the "hey" from me in response. "Well, you can't change it. That's what Mateo chose. And that's what you get." I felt as though I was being lectured like a child. The fact that I was pouting like one really didn't help. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Why'd he choose it? Was it from some girl he thought looked good? Was it an ex? Oh, God. Was it his mother's name? I think they used a name generator. I don't really know. Well, that made me feel a little better. But he could have at least put a little more thought into it. Frowning, I thought about how a name sounded. Mateo and Kaie. Perfect. Elise and Nathaniel. A church couple. I hate them. I cannot call Mateo Nathaniel. That is so wrong. Like that name coming out of my mouth during sex. Are you kidding me? You're being dramatic. Taylor chided, interrupting my rant. Besides, I figured you'd be more excited about having your own house. I tilted my head like a lost puppy. I suppose I had managed to forget I was now a homeowner. Well, Elise Gentry was. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I don't even know where the hell we are. Schefferville, Canada. What the FK is Schefferville? Canada. I deadpanned in. Never in my life had I heard of the place, and I had absolutely no desire to live there. It's around the border of Quebec and Newfoundland, so Eastern Canada. I pondered it. Eastern Canada was owned mostly by one alpha, One or two small packs filled bits of the empty space. But for the most part, Eastern Canada was not rogue country. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. What territory are we in? Taylor looked at me like I was stupid. Are you slow? It's Barrens. I should have guessed. And a part of me knew deep down the answer before she'd even said it. The little twit's name had been popping up all over the place. His name was written in the land agreement. Then, he was the person listed under Jack's name in Mateo's phone. Now, mine and Mateo's little hideaway home was being protected within the confines of his territory. This guy really was pulling out all of the stops for me. We're living in UI room, I concluded. Yes, Baron is providing you guys asylum. Why else would he be so involved? I don't know. I don't know anything because no one tells me shit. It was the truth. I knew what I could piece together on my own, but no one had given me any true details or insights. I knew from Hayden and Taylor that Baron was helping Mateo and I from the inside, actively betraying Vindicta. Mateo and Baron must have decided the best. Safest option for the two of us was to run, which did make sense. Abandoning the pack would sever our ties with it. Without Mateo and I being tied to the pack, Adrian would have no reason to hurt them. Plus, we could hide in Baron's territory unnoticed. Because of Baron's fake alliance, Adrian would never suspect the betrayal and the housing of fugitives on Baron's land. To really sink in the blade, Mateo had our names changed. Our identities were fresh and new and untraceable. All around, it was a smart plan, but I still wasn't satisfied. If Baron was taking Mateo's land, then that had to mean he was taking the pack as well. That pack meant everything to Mateo, and it ate me up thinking that he was just giving it away. I was safe. Clearly, I didn't have any intentions of leaving the house. But where the hell was Mateo? What the hell was he doing? And when the hell was he coming back? They were all questions that made my stomach boil and grumble like hot stew. I didn't like it one bit. Right. Taylor sighed as she plopped her weight back down into the chair. Well, I guess now's the time to lay it all out there. I perked up an eyebrow and leaned forward. The plan. She rolled her eyes at my stupid question. Yes, dumbass. The plan. Mateo. This was humiliating. This was on my top 3 list of humiliating things behind being body, slammed through a table by my mate in front of every alpha in the continent and crying so hard that I threw up during my first shift. Baron was having far too much fun. Leading me around like a mule by the silver, lace ropes that bound my hands together, and the barrel of a gun held to the back of my head. His snide comments didn't go unnoticed as he treated me like his pet. I wanted to send my fist barreling into the side of his head, but I stopped myself. The task at hand was in progress, and it needed to go accordingly for Kai's sake. I wasn't nervous as Baron shoved me roughly past our struck Vindicta members. It isn't every day that the Alpha of UI Room has the Alpha of Sierra's held captive and in tow in the Alpha of Vindicta's territory. There was a lot of Alpha, made energy polluting the grounds, and people were a bit shaken. I wasn't riddled with anxiety. I was, however, apprehensive of the plan and wished that I would have given Kai a proper goodbye. Baron, I growled lowly as he shoved me through a doorway. My shoulder clipped the entrance, nearly causing me to damage the wall. Again, he was having too much fun. Shut it. He warned and continued guiding me with as much aggression as he desired. All I could do was huff in annoyance and keep my feet moving. Almost there, pretty boy. We had come to what I knew was the final hole leading to Adrian's office. I'd been in his territory several times and had the opportunity of venturing into his office. As well, this walk was nothing new. I didn't respond to Baron as we marched up to the elaborate door of the office. I always found it comical how Adrian's door was more ornate than Baron's. The self-proclaimed Prince of Alphas. I could have scoffed aloud just thinking about it. His already inflated ego was about to quadruple. Don't FK this up, Baron cautioned, his words coming as a hiss of sorts. I gritted my teeth. but didn't say what I wanted to. Baron was already shoving the door open. "Oh, Eddie, you're going to love this," Baron sang. I cringed as I was thrust into the room with more force than I was expecting. I stumbled, my eyes snapping to meet Baron's. If looks could kill, he would have been dead twice. "This is your idea of making sure someone is restrained?" Adrian asked, looking at my hands tied behind my back with no other forms of restraint present. Barents coughed and shook the pistol in his hand. "Silver bullets are more than enough to keep an alpha detained." I let out a heavy breath. I could practically feel how absolutely painful it would be to have an actual silver bullet lodged into any part of my body. Werewolves didn't recover from silver. Alpha or not. Single bullet could be fatal. "Alphane's easy, eh?" I could hear the snide smile in his voice as he moved on from my current state of entrapment. Adrian was smug, as he should be. He had the alpha mate of the woman who murdered his mate in his hands. I'd be more than smug if I was in his position. I turned to face him at his figure bitterly. He was seated at his desk, leaning forward excitedly. "Take a seat. I would love to talk." I made no effort to move. Baron was the one who nudged me forward, forcing me to sit down on one of the two chairs in front of Adrian. My hands uncomfortably squished in between the chair and my back. "Did Baron have to tie me so tight? Your little rogue has caused a lot of problems over here, but I'm sure she's filled you in." But I quickly became defensive. "She's a Luna, not a rogue." He stopped to ponder what I had said for a moment and smiled. "Not from what I hear. I'm afraid she seems to have run off. Not a single pack member of yours is able to place her." Turning around to face Baron, he was smiling darkly. Returning my gaze to Adrian, I shook my head in disbelief. "No, she's safe. I left her at the house. In your office. Baron made us aware. I sent my own over to retrieve her, but she seems to have made another incredible exit." Adrian's tone was turning cold and angry. I could see just how frustrated he was that he believed he was so close to finally catching her just to find out she was gone. "Well, then I guess you're stuck with me. Isn't that enough? A mate for a mate." Adrian sat back in his seat, looking over my confined form. In the back of my head, I could hear Baron's impatient foot tapping. Adrian still hadn't said anything, and I was confused whether he was waiting for me to say something first or not. I could just imagine smoke blowing out of his ears as his brain thought over my proposition. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbe, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Baron spoke up. Finally, both of our attentions focused on the eager alpha behind me. I did my part. "Now let me have my fun." He took a step towards me, darkness brewing in his eyes. I had a feeling what he meant by fun, and Adrian's reaction solidified it. "I need him alive." "Baron, says who?" Like he said, "A mate for a mate." The evil look in his eyes made me a bit concerned. He stopped even closer to me than before, gripping the pistol to the point that his knuckles had turned white. It was unsettling. "You know I can't give you that." Yet, I bit down, trying my best to hold my tongue. The last thing I needed to do was interrupt the already strained banter. "She isn't coming back for him." My heart to Baron's words. I wanted to have faith that my little mate would come for me when I needed it. But I didn't. I loved her regardless, but it was the truth, despite it being a hard pill to swallow. It was the basis of the plan. A Luna not coming back to rescue her mate. Unheard of. Adrian scoffed, ticking off Bear even more than before. "Clearly, you didn't know his mate." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. "When I get the girl, you can do whatever you want with him." Adrian negotiated, "but not until I have her in my hands." By this point, Baron was fuming. I could feel the anger rolling off of him in waves to the point that even I was a bit mad that I wasn't a good enough pawn for the life of my mate. "Well, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbe, Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Baron began to say. I heard him sigh tiredly, but I was more focused on the soft click of metal. Adrian's eyes widened at the sound of the pistol's hammer. My heart dropped into my stomach as I anticipated what was to come. Baron, don't, Adrian shouted, standing up from the desk in protest. But he was too late. I don't like waiting for my trophies. Bang! Chapter 46 had only got sketchy twice. So, Matteo isn't actually going to die. Walking back and forth. I'm pretty sure my pacing was creating a draft. He's not supposed to. Taylor responded. Her body slumped back in the chair. I felt the beat of my heart skip a bit. He's not supposed to. What kind of reassuring response was that? Because the bullets are untactual silver. I reminded myself. The bullets in Baron's gun were actual silver. They just look like it. Of course not. Well, at least she didn't say. They aren't supposed to be. And Baron is bringing him here. Yes, and... Wait, why couldn't they do it in while they were there? Again, my brain was on information overload. We'd gone through all the details twice. And, for some reason, I still couldn't wrap my head around it all. For starters, they'd never make it out of the pack house alive. Taylor explained, raising a finger for each point. Second, every alliance that Adrian formed would come for you guys. The goal was to avoid as much bloodshed as possible. Right. Protecting me, but also the pack. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My head was pounding. If there were little people up there, they'd be running around mad, trying to sort and organize the files of information I'd just taken in. It was a lot. I just feel like they could have taken him out. Especially with Baron's help. It was more of an outward thought than a response. However, responded anyway. Koya, you're forgetting Baron's incentive. Matteo's pack. Right. He couldn't have seen it as if Matteo was still alive. Taylor had explained Baron's thought process. His alliance with Adrian was built on the basis that when this was all said and done, Adrian would assist him in his efforts to take the Edith, allowing Baron to murder my mate at the earliest convenience. It didn't quite make much sense to me why Adrian wouldn't want the Edith for himself. But I suppose his bloodlust and desire for revenge was greater than his greed. Baron and Matteo then made an agreement that if Baron provided Matteo and I with safety, Matteo would willingly hand over the Edith. It would provide the pack's safety being in Baron's hands and provide Matteo and I safety. As well, in Baron's land, it was the easiest, safest way to go about it. Oh, I mumbled. Right. Anything else? I could tell by Taylor's tone that she was becoming bored and a bit irritable. This is my house. My statement was quick as I stopped my pacing and pointed at the floor. Yes. She was definitely annoyed. Baron is taking C. Edis. Yes, she was going to kill me. Am I missing anything? Believing I'd managed to cover all of my bases. You're a Canadian citizen. Now, she reminded. Well, that's just understood. Then, I don't think so. Relief flooding me. It had been about an hour of running through it all, and I just wanted to take a nap. There was no way in hell I was actually going to be falling asleep until Matteo walked himself through the front door. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My body was tired, but my mind was restless. Do you know when they will be here? Plopping myself down on the couch, Taylor dragged her hand tiredly down her face. She looked due for a nap. As well. No idea. She shrugged. The last message I got from Baron was before we got on the plane, said he, and Matteo were just arriving at the Indictus pack house. I bit the inside of my lip, thinking of just how long ago that had been. The problem was, I had absolutely no idea how long ago that was. When was that? Yesterday evening. I couldn't stop myself from gaping at her response. Was I knocked out for that long? Yesterday. I repeated in disbelief. I slept through all of that. shaking her head. Taya said, "No. Don't you remember getting off the plane?" "No. Not one bit. You walked off by yourself." "Well, barely. You passed back out the minute we got in the Uber." I wanted to ask her if she was joking. There was not a single memory in my mind of us leaving the plane. The last thing I remembered was the bits and pieces of our conversation as we boarded our flight, and the rest was a blank slate. Did those pills give me some weird ass partial amnesia? What even were those pills? What medication did I take on the flight? Connecting the dots that whatever issues I was having with my memory were from those pills. Taylor laughed nervously, scratching the back of her neck. "Yeah, that was my fault," she admitted. "Mateo told me to give you one, but I told you to. I figured one extra would do you good. Didn't realize it would knock you out for a day. I wasn't a doctor, but I didn't think you should double up on medication. What if I would have died?" I accused. Taylor's hands shot up in a form of surrender. Hey, you wouldn't have died. I was listening to your heart rate the whole time. It only got sketchy twice. Again, I couldn't stop myself from gaping at her. This bitch could have killed me. An uncomfortable rumble bellowed in my stomach, catching both Taylor's and my attention. I hadn't gone several hours without food in months, and my body was not taking it lightly. "Is there any food here?" Standing up from the couch. This was my house, and I didn't even know if there was food in my kitchen. I didn't even know where my kitchen was. "Oh yeah, Farah stocked this place up for you guys," Taylor said, as another sickening noise left my monstrous stomach. God, she was pissed. Taylor stood up from the chair, telling me to follow her. Farah was in on this. I trailed behind Taylor, who took us directly into an immaculate new kitchen with shiny steel appliances, black cupboards, and a grand granite tile, and in the center, it still wasn't sinking in that this was all mine now. She made her way over to a pantry, opening it to reveal 5 stock shelves. God, I leaped that in 3 days max. Despite how absolutely vicious their relationship is, Barton doesn't do much of anything without her. "You want chips?" She was holding 2 bags, one in each hand. I eyed them both, feeling the grumble of hunger in my stomach building. "Salt and vinegar." She tossed them to me, and I caught them easily. "FK me up," I whispered, ripping the bag open. "So wait, what is their problem?" I was always a sucker for some gossip. Taylor shrugged, clearly not too involved in their personal lives. "I don't really know. Farah came from a fairly large pack in Australia. Beatty's daughter. Baron obviously isn't the most serious guy, and Farah is more of a cutthroat but skill. They don't really mix well." I munched down several chips as she explained the dynamic of the two. I'd only ever interacted with the both of them a handful of times. Knowing Baron, he was a coy motherfucker. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. "You could never take anything," he said too seriously. "How long have they been together?" I asked, making Taylor furrow her brows in thought. It was last August. So it was only a few months before I met Mateo. Not too long ago, but definitely a long time for mates to get along and in some type of rhythm. I met Mateo in November. I recalled, mentally counting back the months. 7 months ago. It felt like so much longer. How'd that go? Taylor snatched a handful of chips from my bag and tossed one into her mouth. I snorted, recalling the memory, the escape, the murder, the bar, Jack, the neck snapping, the immaculate shower. It was a lot to remember, but it made me laugh. I was going to FK his beta, and he walked in. I remembered, watching Taylor's face morph into an expression that screamed, "What the FK?" The first month or 2 were. Searching for the right word. Different. Nope. Wrong word. We figured out our shit. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I worked through my issues with pack life, and he, well, I mean, I guess he learned to accept my stupidity. I heard rumors that the two of you were a little FKE up, but I hadn't imagined the beta thing. She was still stuck on that. Yeah, he and I aren't on the best terms right now, I admitted, making a pang hit my head like a mallet slamming into a gong. The feeling reverberated through me, settling into my veins like ice. I don't know if I should be happy about that or feel bad for you, Taylor said, munching through another chip. Right. This girl was Jack's mate. Bad, I affirmed, thinking back on the friendship we shared before my past came and royally FKD it up. Jack was like my first real best friend. Yeah. This shit really screwed it up. Silence settled between the two of us. I didn't want to take another bite for fear that the crunch would be way too awkward as Taylor just stared at me. He doesn't even know about this. Taylor finally spoke up. My eyes widened in shock. Mateo's own beta and best friend didn't know what was happening. As far as he knows, his alpha is dead, and his Luna is missing. Why didn't anyone tell him? I could practically see Jack's face of disappointment and sadness. I'd never seen the kid cry, but I had a feeling he was a crier. Damage control. Mateo figured Jack would want to stop the plan, and Baron agreed. Apparently, he's a very passionate guy. I nodded, agreeing with her final statement. He was one of the most passionate people I'd ever met, but I'd admired him for it. He was truly a beta, in that sense. Are you going back to him? A smile crept to Taylor's lips at my question. Oh yeah. When Mateo gets here, I'm out. Baron will be controlling Edis, so I'll be free to go wherever I want in the territory. Happy for her and Jack. They deserved each other. Truly. They were incredible people, despite her almost killing me by overdose. Oh, God. If Mateo knew I almost went out the same way that his mother did, he would wring Taylor's neck on the spot. I guess that'll be our little secret. Our conversation was interrupted by the loudest, most frightening slam I'd ever heard. The bang echoed off the walls, making both Taylor and I jump in fear. We each were immediately on alert. Shit. They found me. My heart stopped. Tears that hadn't been even remotely present seconds ago lined my eyes, threatening to be released. The deep, husky baritone of the voice ignited all of the nerve endings in my body, urging my legs to move before my mind had the opportunity to tell them to. I bounded out of the kitchen, leaving the chips on the island, entering the living room. My eyes connected with the same dark ones that I had grown to love and melt me on the spot. I felt a heat surge throughout my body, anticipating the warmth of his touch. I raced into his arms that opened to catch me as I flung myself into his grasp. You're okay. Breathing in Mateo's scent, my face was crushed into the crook of his neck, his hand holding the back of my head as the other supported me. A tear slipped down my cheek. The relief I felt was uncontrollable, and my desire to never let him go was even greater. My legs wrapped around his waist like a seatbelt. I was more worried about you, he admitted, making me hold him tighter. I literally can't believe this worked. Baron's untimely voice chimed in. He truly had a way of ruining everything. I pulled back to glare at Baron, but Mateo's face caught my attention first. The hand that had been holding my head now wiped away another fallen tear. Why are you crying? He asked softly, the concern not only appearing in his voice but on his face as well. I shook my head. I'm okay. Just happy. I'm effing starving, Baron stated. The sound of his footsteps followed as he exited toward the kitchen. Thank God. I was going to make a comment about Baron, but Mateo stopped me, cupping my cheek. He placed a soft kiss to my lips, erasing any irritable thought I'd had. It was, as cheesy as it sounded, like electricity, like lightning had coursed its way through our lips. An absolutely euphoric feeling that had my fingers feeling numb. He pulled back before I had the opportunity to deepen the kiss, our eyes connecting to just stare at one another. The love I felt for this man could not be expressed in words or actions or any type of realistic way. He'd given up absolutely everything for me. My eyes widened at the thought. Matteo's brows furrowed, his eyes narrowing as I fidgeted out of his grasp. What's wrong? Allowing my feet to return to the floor, my hand roamed my back pocket, feeling for the packet of papers that I'd stuck in there before Taylor and I left the house. Not responding. I called them out. They were folded several times, a little bit mangled, but I'm sure the look of them was irrelevant at this point. I turned on my heel and walked into the kitchen, feeling Matteo's presence follow me, standing with the door of our fridge open. Baron's attention snapped around to stare at me as I held out the crumpled mess of papers. I think these belong to you. A smirk evaded his features as his gaze settled upon the contract. This is awesome. Chapter 47. Graduated to Dad's studies 3 weeks. It took me 3 weeks to start calling Matteo Nathaniel. I hated it. And every time the name left my lips, it felt wrong, but I was learning to just accept it. Matteo was much better than I was, and I blame it on the fact that he'd had several weeks of knowing my new name to practice it. However, he occasionally did slip up. He'd never once called me Elise while having sex. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But it was neutral. I still couldn't will myself to say another man's name while I was getting to business. Baron had begun his reign of terror immediately. He'd been filling us in on all of the highs and lows of what our former pack had been going through as Matteo and I lived our lives as close to being human as possible. Jack tried to challenge Baron to keep the edges the stand, a lone pack that it was. Stupid boy. Luckily, a few days with his mate changed his mind. Taylor certainly had a way with words, and by the mark on her neck that appeared only 2 days after returning to see Edda's territory, she had a way with her body too. Baron allowed Jack to keep his authority in the pack, allotting him control of the territory under his jurisdiction. Basically, he was still the beta, just under different circumstances. The pack had a service for the loss of their alpha. The news of Matteo's death ripped like a tornado through the werewolf community, bringing out a bad side of my mate for a few days. It was like he was mourning his own death. Vendetta tried waging war with Yoirun for the premature murder of Matteo, claiming that he was a traitor and a danger to all. With Yoirun now having more territory and numbers than even Pack, not a single alpha took the chance. Adrian was forced to back down and submit to Baron. Baron's ego was at an all-time high. Adrian's hunt for me, nevertheless, was still ongoing. He was searching for me across the southern border of Mexico, believing I fled to South America. Not a single suspicion had been raised that Matteo and I were hiding in Yoirun. It was a miracle. Amid the merge of the pack, Daniela found her mate. She was a high-ranking warrior from Yoirun. Yeah. Baron showed me a few pictures of the 5'11" woman with the build of a linebacker. I'd never been more attracted to a woman in my life. Brown hair only a few shades darker than her skin, green eyes, and an androgynous look that made me drool. I could just imagine Daniela and the godly human being together immaculate. I did feel bad, however, that the poor girl had to deal with Dan for the rest of her life. It was probably going to be torturous. A rapid knock on the front door startled me, making me jump. It sounded like someone was unloading an assault rifle on the exterior of my house. "Let me in," a gruff voice grunted as the heavy pounding persisted. I groaned, wiping my wet hands off on a towel. Every time I tried washing dishes, something just had to interrupt me. "Stop pounding on it like that." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Rounding the corner of the kitchen and walking to the front door, the pounding slowed down but didn't cease. I was going to kill him. I ripped the door open, watching the alpha walk past me. His body was tense, riddled with anxiety. "The source unknown to me. I've already told you to just come in," I recommended, watching Bear and dramatically flop onto my couch. It had been about 2 months since Matteo and I had gone into hiding, and Baron made a visit to our home about 3 times a week. Conveniently, when Matteo was at work, "She's f***ing pregnant," he all but spat, running his hands down his face. My lips formed an O. I wasn't too surprised. Mateo and I had been betting on it since we got here. It was only a matter of time before she wound up pregnant the way the two of them went at it. I was surprised that the normally smug Alpha seemed defeated. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Shutting the door, I walked over to the couch and took a seat beside Baron. Why is it bad? Mateo and I both had an unspoken agreement that a child was never going to be a part of our future, but it was hard for me to imagine Bear and not wanting a little spawn of his own. I'm 26. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'm not father material, he complained. I rolled my eyes. Dramatic. We could start making a list of names. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Jokingly, he was not the least bit amused, and eyed me nastily. Not the time. I'll start Kai. Again, not amused. Having enough of my banter already, he pushed himself off the couch and in the direction of the kitchen. I didn't bother to follow him. There's Fireball on top of the fridge, I called out, hoping he'd bring it in with him. I already know. If a tone of voice could kill, I'd be 6 feet under. The familiar sound of glasses tinking together echoed into the room as I heard Baron scrape the handle of Fireball off of the fridge. Malachi, I continued, seeing Baron stomp back into the living room with 2 glasses and the liquor in his hands. No, he said darkly, opening the liquor before he'd even sat back down. He handed me my glass and poured the drink inside. The scent of cinnamon enveloped me. No matter how many times this shit made me throw up, it still got me so excited. He didn't bother pouring any into his own. He just took a massive gulp from the handle instead. I grimaced. Mateo was going to be pissed. Cup, I reminded, pointing to the glass in his hand. Rolling his eyes, he poured the Fireball in it. Kylie. Kaye. I swear to God. Elise. I corrected. It felt good to finally be the one correcting other people. Baron returned my rectification with a bored expression that I'd become accustomed to over the past few months. You're not funny, he deadpanned, looking him dead in the eyes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Baron and I had graduated to friends. With his constant visits and gossip sessions on my new phone, I found myself becoming Baron's friend. Seemingly, his only friend. Apparently, the egocentric Alpha had a hard time keeping people around. Wonder why. Mateo wasn't fond of the friendship, but I think he was starting to warm up to it. Baron and I were never going to happen. It was merely a figment of Baron's wild imagination. Clearly, he was going to be stuck with Farah for a long time. I'd be lying. However, if I said that the new friendship didn't have a positive impact on me, I finally had someone else to talk to other than Mateo. I'd also become acquainted with Farah. She was exactly what Taylor described her to be, a buttskill. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Don't do this. Don't do that. Do it like this. Eat quieter. It was exhausting. Regardless, I enjoyed her company from time to time. It counteracted mine and Baron's drunken stupidity. Baron took another massive gulp of the Fireball, and I smiled as his face scrunched up from the burn. It had become our drink of choice because of its punch. We only allowed ourselves to drink tequila on Tuesdays. My son will not be named after you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Pouring a little more alcohol into his glass. But your daughter. Baron gritted his teeth as I continued to pester him with the thought of his future child. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, making me put up my hands in feigned surrender. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I get it. Pretending to give up. Baron's body visibly relaxed, sinking into the couch with his eyes shut. You'd rather name it after Matteo. Instantly, his eyes snapped open. Kaye. He snarled just as the front door was opened. Our attention snapped to the devilishly handsome man standing in the doorway. I could hardly stop myself from drooling at my mate. He was a working man, clad in dirty jeans, a T-shirt plastered with dark grease, and tanned Timberlands that had seen better days. There was something about a dirty man that gave me dirty thoughts. Why are you shouting at my mate? Matteo scowled, kicking off his work boots. I hated when he tracked dirt through the house. She won't stop being a pest. Darren grumbled, eyeing me with a vicious glare. Matteo walked over to me and picked me up from the couch so that he could sit. He pulled me back into his lap, not caring to change out of his soiled clothing. I did my best not to think about it. My L. Never. The disbelief in his tone was clearly fake, but I didn't mind. I was aware that I was a pest. I liked it that way. Alpha Mend Axe just graduated to dad status. I explained. I didn't need to see his face to know that he was just as smug as I had been. Like I said, we had been waiting. No kidding. Matteo mused as we each watched Baron slumped back into his seat and let out the most childish whine ever. Maybe he wasn't ready to be a father. Oh, come on. You'll be fine. I tried to be comforting, but it came out as more of a mocking statement. I like my sleep schedule. Baron exasperated. I like going to bars, and going to the gym, and seeing my friend, and F-king Farah wherever and whenever I want. I can't do that with a smaller version of her running around. I'll be told off by a toddler 24/7. I thought by the end of his rant he was going to have a breakdown. His argument, nonetheless, was sort of valid. My parents still did whatever they wanted after having my brother and I. I countered. Isn't your dad in a pack prison? Baron. Matteo growled lowly. I rolled my eyes at his antics. My dad being put in a prison was a sore spot for me, but not nearly in the way that it used to be. Yeah, but I put him there. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Leaning further into Matteo's chest, his arms tight and around me. If he strangled me to death right then and there, I would have died happily. Oh God! Baron grimaced. He looked at the alcohol in his glass as he swirled it. Farah's child would absolute in a prison. His wallowing was interrupted by the obnoxious ringing of his phone. With another toddler, like wine, he pulled the phone out and answered it. Hello. Impatience was seeping through his greeting. The call was short. Baron said a whole 3 words. When? And fine. Dramatically, he ended the call, downed the rest of his liquor, and stood up. My brow quirked, silently questioning his motive. I'm needed, he huffed, making a grand exit to the door. Bye, Dad. I waved, which earned me the bird. Matteo chuckled, his warm chest vibrating against my back. Butterflies. Butterflies everywhere. I hardly noticed Baron slam the door shut behind him because of them. F-king idiot. Matteo laughed, placing a soft kiss to the back of my neck. Cheeky bastard. Not being tied to pack responsibilities gave us a lot of alone time. We'd never been closer, and our relationship had never been healthier. I wasn't even surprised when he told me. Not after he texted me last week saying they went at it for a whole 8 hours. I admitted as Matteo continued peppering kisses down my neck. He was the worst to gossip with sometimes. Baron really did trump him in that department. I pulled away from him, turning so that I could see his face. With a lopsided smile, I tried rubbing away some of the dirt on his forehead. His eyes watched me, a smile forming at his own lips. Did you ever think about having kids? I almost threw up. Immediately, I stopped rubbing away at his forehead, and my smile faltered. I stuttered. I didn't think you wanted any. It was the honest truth. Matteo had never said about wanting kids, and he seemed honestly revolted by them. It never occurred to me that deep down Matteo may have actually wanted some. Do you not? I didn't particularly enjoy his tactic of answering me with the same question that I just tried to avoid. No, I drug out slowly. I expected his facial expression to change, maybe even get a little angry. But he didn't. He just shrugged as if I told him something completely lackluster. We could get a dog. My mate was an absolute heaven sent. So no kid? I asked hesitantly. No kids, he repeated, seemingly unfazed. Condoms will remain my best friend. I could have married him right then and there. I leaned in to meet his lips. He responded without an ounce of hesitation. The familiar fire ignited throughout every nerve ending within my body as our lips moved in sync with one another. His hand ran up my back, to my neck, and settled in my hair. His fingers wound through the strands and pulled them into a fist, making me moan in his mouth. I could feel his smirk through the kiss, making me want to stop and punch him. He was spending a little too much time with Baron. I rolled my hips teasingly, grinding down on him. As he groaned, I could feel him stiffen under me. Now it was my turn to smack. Well, why don't you go put one on? It took him a moment to figure out what I was talking about, but his eyes decidedly did. Okay, he breathed, allowing me to get off of him. He quickly padded away towards our bedroom, but stopped in the hallway to where I could still see him. He turned around to look at me. Do you want me to take a shower first? Nope, I denied, biting my lip. I'll follow you in. The giddy look in his eyes lit up like a match, and he booked it into our room like a kid running for candy. Down, pushing myself up from the couch. I love this man. Epilogue, it's just puppy love. Soft kisses trailing my jawline invaded my personal bubble, pulling me from my slumber. Forcing my eyes open, I observed the perpetrator, his deep blue eyes finding my own. Clouded by sleep, I growled lowly, giving him the nastiest look I could muster at 8 and rolled away. Ooh, scary, he commented mockingly. I thought monsters were supposed to be under the bed. Well, this one sleeps in it. I snapped. I didn't want to get out of bed, but I knew I had to. The bed dipped a bit as he moved closer to me. His soft lips kissed the skin on the back of my neck, making the hair on my arms stand up. You're not actually scary. I growled again and elbowed him in the chest. He laughed, falling back into the mattress. You're mean. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. I grunted with my face shoved into my pillow. With another laugh, I felt Matteo sit up in the bed and heard the click of his phone being unlocked. You going to wake her up? Or do you want me to? I sighed tiredly. I already knew what that meant. He wanted a shower before work and didn't want to deal with any extra morning duties. I got it. I sighed and rolled out of bed like a log. My feet thudded against the floor heavily. No matter how many times I woke up early, I was never going to be a morning person. I love you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Matteo called out. I didn't respond. My words weren't ready yet. Cutting my way down the hall, I rounded the corner to face the white oak door. My eyes wandered to the same to half, peeled off stickers that I still couldn't get off. It had become a routine, rolling my eyes. I gripped the doorknob and gently pushed the door open. Soft snores met my ears as I flicked on the light, illuminating the soft pink room. My little girl laid sprawled out in the bed big enough to fit a midget, her mess of dark hair covering her face and pillow. My heart swelled, taking in her perfect, sleeping features. The dainty button nose swarmed by a light dusting of freckles. thick lashes that barely touched her cheeks. Her skin was fair, unfortunately not being able to snatch her father's olive tone. Regardless, she was beautiful, the contrast of the pale skin and dark hair making her my very own sleeping beauty. I walked over to her peaceful form and crouched down. My hand rubbed soothingly up and down her back as I tried to ease her awake. She stirred a bit, her nose scrunched up, clearly not ready to face the world yet. "Joey, wake up," I cooed. Her cerulean eyes slowly popped open, drifting up to mine. I smiled warmly and turned one in response. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Pretty girl. It's Wifty flipped. However, as she winked, "I want to go till day." I gave her a lopsided smile. Mornings like these happen more often than not. I know. Kindergarten is hard. She was a lot like me in the sense that neither of us had much of an interest in learning. Mateo and I just hoped she would grow out of it. Realizing that she wasn't going to be winning this argument, her bottom lip jutted out, and tears gathered in her eyes. Mateo was much better at being the parent when Joanna started crying. "Come on. No tears. No tears. Mummy, I wanna," she argued. The crack in her voice made my heart break a little. "Daddy won't be happy if you stay home." Again, I warned. A little tear slipped down her cheek, making the chasm in my heart split further. I kissed it away. Joe. Mateo's voice chimed in from behind us. We both turned to see his large figure standing in the doorway with a brow raised. "It's time for school." Joey's hands shot out to fist the fabric of my shirt, her wave hiding from her father. The tears no longer escaped to her cheeks, but her frown deepened. Dad was a more difficult person to convince than Mom. "I went yes yesterday," she defied quietly. I wanted to back her up and say, "Yeah, babe, she went yes yesterday," but I'd already used that excuse to its max. Mateo remained strong, shaking his head. "Joanna, school isn't optional." "Okay, the full name." I could feel her shrink away. Noticing this, Mateo sighed and entered the room. I thought he was going to crouch down beside me, but he resorted to picking her out of bed. She immediately wound her arms around his neck, tucking her head into his chest. No matter how upset she got with him, she'd always cling to him like her little life depended on it. "Joey," Mateo cooed, as she mumbled into his chest. Residual tears found their way into the fabric of his shirt. "You need to go get ready with Mommy." Her blue eyes peered up sadly at her father. He placed a soft kiss to the crown of her head, making me smile. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the time on the wall clock. I felt bad that Mateo had to waste his mornings before work helping me coax our daughter. He never complained, however, and for that I was more than grateful. "Okay," she frowned. "I love you." Placing her down on the floor, her fists were still balled into his shirt, not wanting to let go yet. She was a class taller. Joy didn't reciprocate the response, but Mateo didn't seem to mind. Giving me a quick kiss, I mumbled a thank you in response before he left the two of us. Joey watched closely as her father retreated. For a moment, I thought she might take after him, but she didn't. She stood, watching the door, until I pulled her away into the bathroom. Our morning routines were simple, but they felt like they took an entire morning, despite them only being hour-long activities. Mateo woke me up. We tried alarm clocks on several occasions, but my ability to sleep through them was incredibly off-putting. As Mateo put it, "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I didn't mind Mateo waking me up. It was much more pleasant. Most of the time, I was the trooper who stormed Joey's room while Mateo got ready for work. After 9 years, he'd worked his way up to being a boss, so he took everything a little too seriously. The pay was nice. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." We got it cool. ground pool outfit. I spent about half an hour getting Joey ready for school, teeth, brushing, hair doing, and trying on at least 3 different dresses until she found the perfect one. Matteo treated her like a princess, so she quickly developed the complex of one, ending out the final half hour of our morning. We all met down in the kitchen where I made breakfast. Some days it was more edible than others, but mother duties forced me to pick up the practice. Clad in a blue dress made of a jean material with a little white beret holding back the front strands of curl hair, Joey sat at the table, patiently waiting for her breakfast. She had a doll in each of her little hands as she babbled to herself. Some days, I listened to her fictional conversations for entertainment. Today, however, I was more focused on not breaking the yolk of Matteo's eggs. I suppose my attention was a little more fixated on the eggs than I thought because I about screamed when Matteo's arms wrapped themselves around me from behind. Leaning his face in the crook of my neck, his warm breath spread across it, sending a shiver down my spine. Becoming tense for only a moment, I relaxed into his touch. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Nana. His voice was low and thick with something more than just sleep. I quirked an eyebrow as his hands wandered down my sides and settled on my hips, pulling me against him. If these eggs come out scrambled, it's your fault. Feeling the butterflies in my stomach erupt as soft kisses would trail down my neck, Matteo chuckled, pulling away from me and taking a seat at the table with his daughter. I could faintly hear him ask why the one doll didn't have a shirt on as I refocused on the task at hand. I only managed to break one of the 3 yolks. Matteo didn't complain, but I could have broken all 3, and he still wouldn't have said anything. Joey's breakfast was far easier than her father's, one scrambled egg with melted cheese on top. The kid had immaculate taste, and luckily, I was a culinary genius. I sat at the table with the 2 as they ate. It took Joey about 10 minutes longer to eat her food than Matteo. Despite the difference in portion, Joey loved to tell every possible story she could in between every bite. Matteo half listened, saying, "Yeah, that's nice," and so on. I always listened. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It provided me with good stories for Baron when he came over for Tequila Tuesdays. I'll pick you up later. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Placing a soft kiss to Joey's forehead. Leaving was the best and worst part of the day. It gave me a second to breathe. Again, but after an hour I was bored. I missed my man and the miniature version of myself. Joey nodded, reaching up to take Matteo's hand. I smiled seeing it. It was absolutely nothing unusual. It was just good to know she trusted and loved her father. It was reassuring. He always took her to school, and she always came back home with a story about their car ride there. Moving my attention to my husband, I angled my face up to plant a kiss to his lips. The simple act still managed to make me feel giddy. I love you. I'll be back for dinner. Wow, guffle of the love language. My morning was filled with routine responsibilities. I made my own breakfast, a fat bagel with cream cheese. It was a craving I picked up when I was pregnant with Joey that never went away. I preferred to eat my breakfast alone. It gave me a minute to go relax on the patio. Read something. Just have a moment for myself. It never lasted. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Because the sink filled with dishes, baskets of laundry, and scattered toys always were calling out for my attention. By the time I had to pick up Joey from the bus stop, I was just putting away the last of her toys that would be a mess on my floor. Again, in another hour. Hear me out. Baron began, making me sigh. He was always filled with the dumbest ideas anymore. I think he started losing his mind after his 3rd kid. We got a boat in the pool. I took a sip of my lemonade, wishing then that I would have spiked it. No one was putting a boat in my pool. After picking up Joey, I found Baron and his 3 minions waiting in my house dressed in swimming attire. Baron had his own cool. Yet, he insisted on coming to ours because, and I quote, "Well, you have a slide. I would never turn down the quality time with my best friend. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Any excuse to talk to someone who wasn't a 5-year-old was good enough for me. Baron and I sat on the edge of the pool. He had a margarita in one hand and a sandwich in the other as we watched our children run rampant through the water. His youngest, a 2-year-old girl named Dara, sat in between his legs, splashing the water wildly. The middle child, the one most likely to go missing at any given moment, was whipping around a pool noodle, doing his best to hit everyone and everything on accident. If Rule didn't remind me so much of myself as a child, I would probably hate him. His eldest, however, pushed Joey around in an inflatable tube, attached at her hip as always. "I'm just saying, it could be life-changing," he defended, making me roll my eyes at him. The only life-changing thing about putting a boat in my pool would be when Rule decides to take charge and run everyone over, nearly killing us. And you wonder why your wife won't let you watch your kids alone, taking a drink of his margarita. He shook his head. I absolutely never wonder that. My wife is a control freak. Followed by a massive bite out of his sandwich. "I'm telling Mom," Rule threatened, pointing the long, blue noodle at his father. Baron scowled, pointing his sandwich back at the 5-year-old. "I will literally never speak to you again." It were times like these that made me question if Baron was ever actually meant to be a father. "Oh, you forget by the time you go back." Watching Castel, Baron's 8-year-old, take my daughter's hands in his own and pull her gently through the water, her laughter echoed off of the soft ripples caused by Rule's dramatic movements. "Little bastard never forgets anything," Baron grumbled, this time quiet enough that his little hellion wouldn't hear. When I didn't respond, he followed my gaze to see what I had found more interesting than his midlife crisis. Castel pulled Joey out from the floatie, holding her in his arms. She wrapped her arms tightly around his neck, and for a moment, I was worried the poor kid couldn't breathe. He'd never admitted he couldn't. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Not if that meant Joey having to let him go. His infatuation for my daughter was practically instinct. The moment he laid his eyes on her, he couldn't leave her alone. The two had been practically inseparable from the moment Joey entered the world, which didn't sit well with my overprotective husband. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Since his daughter seems to reciprocate the infatuation, you know, you could just do the pure girl soul in just moving. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Baron said, softly, knowing exactly what he was referring to. He meant your room's central pack house, but I knew that in the bigger picture he meant your room pack. It was a movement he'd been fighting for since Joey was born. Baron wanted Mateo and to rejoin pack life more than most things, and my daughter was an incredible excuse. He'd even offered to hand the beta title to Mateo, but my mate declined it. "It's not safe." "Not happening," I concluded. I hoped he would end the conversation there, but I knew he wouldn't. Baron never could just take a no. "Well, it's now or later." My jaw clenched at his snide remark. "We all know she'll join as soon as their wolves finally make the connection," he stated with absolute certainty, staring directly at Joey. It wasn't a secret the way that Castel and Joey interacted. It was rare, but not an unbelievable occurrence. To my agent extraordinaire, meticulously, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. St. Castel was going to be one of the most powerful alphas to ever exist. The mate bond was potentially making an early appearance in little ways. and Baron was banking on it. He believed with his entire heart and soul that the two were destined for one another, and it pained me to say that I did too. It absolutely terrified me. They're just kids. We don't know that yet. I denied. The weight of my life settled on my chest like a slab of concrete. It's the balancing of the universe. Till I agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Think about it. No, I didn't want to think about it because the more I did, the more it made sense. The power that Baron now held after securing C. Edis was indescribable. It was influence that no Alpha had ever imagined possible. Who knows how great it would become after the title was handed down to Castle. Baron's logic was that, because C. Edis had always been under the reign of the Nes-Eze family, it would only be correct for it to remain like that in some way. The mating of our children would secure that, and I hated it. Joey was safe living off the grid, away from the public eye. She was safe living as Joanna Hall, the daughter of a part-time bartender and a construction boss. The minute she would rise to power, every Alpha in the continent would be looking into her. It would be impossible for one of them to not dig up enough dirt to figure out who she truly was. Joanna Eze, daughter of Alpha and Lunan Eze, the dead and mourned Alpha and his wanted mate gone rogue. The pool day was cut short by a thunderstorm that swept through. Baron wrangled his monsters and bounced, leaving Joey and I to entertain ourselves in the house until Matteo got home. I made dinner before Matteo arrived so that it was ready when he did. It was an uneventful dinner. Joey just rambled about how Castle came over and swam with her. Matteo raised a brow at me from across the table and disapproving suspicion when she mentioned that he held her hands. Poor girl had a helicopter, parent father. I gave Joey a bath after dinner. She hung out with the two of us for a while in the living room, watching television curled up in her father's lap, before Matteo took her to bed. Feeling tired myself, I turned off the TV and moped to our bedroom. I never really knew why it took so long for Matteo to put Joey to bed. My goodnights were quick, a 5-minute affair that ended with a kiss. Matteo, however, took his grand time. I always waited about 20 minutes for him to come back out of her room. I'd asked him a few times what he'd been doing, but he just pushes away the question. At this point, I'm sure it's something embarrassing and deteriorating to his manly bravado. Perhaps he is to tell her stories of princesses or dress up as one. I thought you might have gotten lost. I joked as Matteo padded into our room. He rubbed his eyes, tiredly, sliding into bed beside me. He responded with a grunt, ripping off his shirt and pulling me to his chest. Geez, lover, boy, what's got you in a mood? Sensing his sud and decline in happiness, that Castle better keep his little hands to himself. He grumbled into my... I rolled my eyes. He was so dramatic. He's a kid, and she's my baby. He countered, a growl edging into his voice. This was an argument I wasn't going to win, nor could I ever. It's just puppy love. I did panting, silently praying that what I was putting out into the universe was the actual truth. Yeah, until it isn't. Clearly our daughter's seemingly inevitable future was something that was weighing on both of our minds tonight. I pulled out of Matteo's grip and turned round so that we were able to face one another. His eyes found mine, immediately pulling me into a trance. I couldn't possibly fathom I'd gotten so lucky. She deserves what we have, regardless. My statement, although spoken softly, was a strong one. I wanted my daughter to experience the true love and happiness that Matteo and I had. She deserved it, even if it jeopardized her safety. Matteo leaned forward, placing a soft kiss to my lips. We stayed like that for a moment, only breaking for a fraction of a second to place another and another. He used the tips of his fingers to push back any stray strands of hair in my face as he pulled back. The little stress lines on the corners of his eyes had begun making an appearance in recent years, and they were really coming to light today. I'd do it all. Again. You know that, right? He asked sincerely, searching my eyes. I nodded, knowing what he was already referring to. Yes, and I love you every day for it. It was the honest truth. I loved this man with every ounce of the word itself. He put his pack in my life before his very own, and continued to do it every day. He was an incredible man and husband. He meant everything to me. Matteo now's easy was absolutely everything to me. Alpha or not.